Los Angeles, the city of dreams and broken promises. In 1947, Hollywood was the promised place where young women like Elizabeth Short sought a future. But what Elizabeth found was not the glitz and glamour of show business, it was pure horror. Elizabeth Short was one of thousands who came to California in the hope of making their big break. She was young, just 22 years old, and was described by many as beautiful, if somewhat mysterious. But behind her smile lay the loneliness of a young woman lost in a city that had little regard for dreamers. Her friends called her the Black Dahlia. It was a nickname inspired by a popular movie at the time, The Blue Dahlia. Elizabeth, with her black hair and elegant looks, seemed tailor-made for the role of the mysterious beauty. But no one suspected that this nickname would soon go down in history not as a tribute, but as a symbol of one of the most brutal crimes the city had ever seen. January 15, 1947, it was an ordinary morning in Los Angeles. The sun was shining on the dusty streets and life was going on as usual. But something unusual was about to happen that morning. A walk that would end a young woman's life and put her forever in the shadow of death. It was shortly after 10 a.m. when Betty Berzinger walked through the streets with her young daughter. They were walking through a vacant lot in the Limerick Park neighborhood when Betty suddenly stopped. She saw something. No. She saw someone. A woman. At first, she thought it was a mannequin, carelessly discarded and broken in two. But as she got closer, she realized the gruesome truth. The body was horribly mutilated. The woman, or what was left of her, lay naked on the ground. Her body had been cut in half, cleanly, as if it had been the work of a surgeon. The face was mutilated, the mouth grotesquely slit into a cruel smile. It was a picture of horror. It didn't take long for the police to arrive on the scene. The press was also quickly on the scene, and so began one of the largest and most notorious murder investigations in Los Angeles history. But despite the zealous efforts of the investigators, the case was soon to falter. The disturbing details of the crime overshadowed any progress. The crime scene offered the police few clues. The body was completely drained of blood, and there were no clues pointing to the perpetrator. The homicide squad was stunned. How could someone commit such a crime and disappear without a trace? It quickly became clear that this was no ordinary murder. The precision with which Elizabeth Short's body had been dismembered suggested that the perpetrator must have had medical or surgical knowledge. But despite these clues, the police were still baffled. There were no fingerprints, no witnesses, no clear lead. While the investigators feverishly searched for answers, the Black Dahlia case became a media spectacle. The newspapers were full of headlines, and everyone wanted the latest information about the gruesome crime. The city was in turmoil. In the weeks following the murder, numerous people contacted the police, many of them claiming to have seen Elizabeth before she disappeared. But these clues led nowhere. Then, a few days later, a newspaper received a package. It was addressed to none other than the murderer herself. The package contained Elizabeth Short's personal belongings, her birth certificate, photos, business cards, and a notebook. It was as if the killer was taunting the investigators, showing them how close they got to him without ever really catching him. But even these macabre gifts did not lead the police any closer to the perpetrator. The investigation continued, countless suspects were questioned, but none could be clearly linked to the murder. To this day, the murder of Elizabeth Short remains unsolved. But the theories about her killer are numerous. Many believe that the killer was a doctor or someone with medical knowledge due to the surgical precision of the mutilations. There were suspects, including doctors and men who had known Elizabeth, but none were ever convicted. Other theories suggest that Elizabeth was involved in a criminal network or secret society that eventually led to her death. But no matter which theory you follow, one thing remains certain: the murder of Elizabeth Short is a mystery that still fascinates and shocks people to this day. The name Black Dahlia is now immortalized. Elizabeth Short's life and her horrific death have become a part of American crime history. Her murder remains unsolved, and the case reminds us that even in a city of light, the shadow is never far away. Many years have passed since the gruesome murder, but the case remains unforgotten. The Black Dahlia will forever be a symbol of darkness in a city known for its dreams that sometimes turn into nightmares. When the wind blows through the streets of Los Angeles, you could almost believe that the whispers of the past still echo in the dark alleys. And in those shadows, the legend of the Black Dahlia lives on.